Cool. Hi, everyone. Maybe I'll just get started as folks kind of trickle in. Thank you for coming. We're so excited for this event today. This conversation has been kind of in the works for a while, so we're really genuinely just so excited to have this. This is the Reflections on Space Making in Institutions for Black Muslim Youth. This event has been a collaboration between the Caucus and CCMS, which is the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies at SFU. I am Marianne. I use she, her pronouns. I am just going to be moderating the event today, but all credit truly goes to Saba and Amal and all the other folks who have made this happen. I am majoring in gender, race, sexuality, and social justice at UBC and have been a part of the caucus for a couple months now. I am currently on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Semiahmoo First Nations. So that is colonially known as White Rock in Canada, in BC. If you don't know what lands you are on, or if you'd like to kind of get to know a little bit more, I encourage you to visit nativeland.ca. I'll drop that link in the chat. But maybe just to get some chat activity going, you could all just drop in the chat what lands you're coming from. And I will pass it off to Adele to give us a bit of an intro.
Thank you so much, Marianne. My name is Adil Iskander, and I am the interim director of the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies at SFU. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to be working collaboratively with the caucus to bring this event forward with all of the incredibly important interventions that we expect to get. I'm calling in today, and as well as the center's offices are situated on the ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. We recognize that we are uninvited guests on these lands, and in many instances, our presence is a reinforcement and an affirmation of the historical and present settler colonial practices that have effaced and erased the lives of indigenous communities on this land. And so in no small measure, our commitment to the mandate of trying to decolonize both the land and the practices that happen on it are part of the objective of the center and are becoming more so in these years and in the days and months and years ahead. But also recognizing that decolonization entails acknowledging the existence of disparities among our communities and how to find intersectional solidarity between our communities and the landowners on whose land which we reside and live and act and work, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to let you know that it is this particular project and this event is admittedly the effort of the caucus. As the center, we are happy to support and in any and all capacities that we can the work of the caucus. The caucus has been really very imaginative, very creative, and very intriguing in their approach to the topic at hand, thinking about Black Muslim youth subjectivities, what institutions can and should do, and also recognizing the structural inequities that render Black Muslim youth really sort of marginal in every respect, but also helping us recognize what we can do to try and shift those inequities, shift those structural problematics. And so I want to acknowledge and thank every member of the caucus for the work that they've done. From our end, Amal Abdullah, who is on, actually Amal is sort of straddling both organization as both a member of the caucus and also I can now kind of officially say the incoming interim program assistant for the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies. So she has been integral in making those connections and making this event possible. But everybody in the caucus, I want to thank you immensely for the work that you've done and continue to do. We will continue to support any and all efforts that you dedicate to the work of pushing the boundaries and challenging institutions, including and especially our own, being SFU or UBC or other institutions of higher learning. So thank you all, and I very much look forward to hearing from our remarkable panelists and to learn from you. So thank you, and I will pass it on to Sabah Gauss. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm really excited for this event, and working with CCMS has been a blast for this event, and I'm so glad to see so many familiar and new faces come out. So I thought I would just, as Adil mentioned, I am part of the Caucus, so I thought I'd just do a brief overrun of what this organization is. So the Caucus is a student-led organization that aims to dismantle harmful colonial Eurocentric narratives by providing a platform for marginalized peoples to share their perspectives that are often excluded within the academy and society at large. And within the Caucus, we have several projects, and I am the project lead for the Muslim Studies project. And so the goal of it is to demonstrate the diversity of Muslims around the world in order to challenge Orientalist tropes and representations pertaining to Muslims. And with this specific project, the Black Muslim experiences reflecting on space making within institutions, we really wanted, as Adil mentioned, in addressing these inequities, the structural inequities pertaining to Black Muslims and other marginalized folks. And with this event, we wanted to amplify Black Muslims by providing them a platform and to allow the audience to really grapple with the nuances and complexities surrounding the experiences of Black Muslims. And not just to say this is a black and white issue, but there's a lot of gray areas, and we really want to go into that and untangle these kind of complexities. So that's just a bit of what we do at the Caucus, and I guess I'll pass it back on to Marianne to take it away for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saba. So just some housekeeping stuff before we get started. We are recording this, so just so everyone is aware. We're hoping to have the panel discussion go from now until 6 o'clock, and then from 6 to 6 we'll Q&A. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please drop them in the chat. We have Saba and Amal moderating that. Again, any like insensitive or harmful comments, of course, will result in being removed, but I'm sure that I feel like if you're here, you're good. And then we also have the captions enabled. If you need help accessing those, you just click the button that says more at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then click view subtitles or view full transcript. Cool. And I guess just a PSA about me, I'm fasting today for the first time in a long time. So I'm sorry if my brain is like not catching up. I'll do my best to be coherent. But I guess in getting started, I will pass it off to our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Sahar. If you could please tell us a bit about yourself, like what your ethnic background is, if you'd like to share some stories about you or what you're studying or any passions, really whatever you'd like.
Thank you, Marianne. And hello, everyone. My name is Sahar. My ethnic background is Sudanese. And I guess I'm born in Canada, and I lived here the majority of my life. I actually went to BC Muslim School, which was a great experience for me. And it was basically from grade 1 to grade 5. I also lived in Sudan for a bit, which I really enjoyed. And I was able, to connect with my roots, to learn how to speak my native language, Arabic, which really that experience made me realize I did not know how to speak any Arabic, and it really just humbled me because prior to that I thought I did when I did it. And the funny part is my grandpa was actually an Arabic teacher, which the irony, his granddaughter barely knows Arabic. And yeah, I volunteered a little bit with ISS in BC, where I was able to do a number of positions from like translating to volunteering in an income tax clinic as an income tax clinic assistant. I worked for Winners for a bit, and I also did Radius SFU. So what we did was work with people in the community and advisors and try to understand why the rates of chronic diseases are high in marginalized communities. And right now I'm just a student at UBC doing my 3rd year, and I'm switching in between programs every time, but for now I'm doing psych. And that's all I got to say. So thank you, Marianne.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sahar. Next, I'll pass it off to Bashira, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Marianne. Hi, everyone. My name is Bashira. To start off with, my ethnic background is I am Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. I grew up there for, I think, 16 years of my life. And in that time, I went to a mixed Muslim and non-Muslim schools for different like stages of my life. But I did like madrasa over the weekends, and so that was my generally for at least like growing up, that was my institution on weekends for learning more about like the religion in general. And then after the 16 years, I came to Canada for the rest of high school. And then I'm currently a fourth year UBC undergrad student studying chemical engineering or process engineering, as I like to call it. And I'm currently on co-op actually. So not on campus. I currently have a 12-month co-op job as a plant engineering student at Suncor Energy. So that's what's mostly taking up my time these days. And it's my first work experience ever, just coming out of like academia or like just studying in general. So that's been really interesting. And as can be alluded to maybe by the program that I'm in, some of my interests include just green energy, I guess systems thinking as it relates to philosophy and how that just ties into making engineering less traditional and methodical in how you approach it and more questioning, curious, and aware of what it takes to really store technology for future generations.
That's incredible. Thank you. You just blew my mind with all of that. Next, Oromia, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. So I don't even know where to begin, but yeah, my name is Oromia, and I'm from ethnically, I'm from a region located in Ethiopia called Oromia. So you know where my name's from. But I was born and raised in Somalia, and I lived there for since I was 7. But then thankfully we moved to Canada as refugee. And yeah, so when I came to Canada, it was my first time starting school. I had no experience in like going to public school or any of that. So off the bat, I was like put into second grade. Was I had to learn English, had to try to keep up with my class and like grade level. And so yeah, that was it. And then I transitioned to high school. And high school was a good experience for me because it was a place I felt like there was just a lot of things for me to a lot of opportunities for me and a lot of clubs to join. So I was all like, every club at lunch I was there, and I just found like it was just super fun for me. And then it was like time, like in grade 12, I had to switch to going to university, and university was something that was like, never thought of for me because I was just like, I was all the way in the bottom, and now I'm like, applying to these big university, and none of my parents had the privilege of going to university. So like having that journey to just applying for these schools, I felt like, wow, like this is just like my parents' dream and my dream. So getting accepted to SFU was just like wow. It was amazing. And so yeah, and now I'm here just first year, so I'm just trying to get comfortable and trying to like reach out to people, trying to reach out to these organization clubs, like, trying to find kind of like my space. And just hearing from the two panelists, it's amazing that you guys like have accomplished so much and you guys are a part of these amazing things. So inshallah in the future, like that's all I want to like be a part of something bigger than I am. So yeah, it's really inspiring to hear from you guys. And yeah, I hope I'm not missing anything. I'm studying psychology first year, and yeah, that's kind of it about me.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so humbled to be here among you all. You're all so incredible. But maybe just to get started, I will kind of pose the questions to all of the panelists as a whole, and you can kind of speak to what speaks to you. Our first question is, how would you define inclusive spaces and space making, and what makes you feel welcomed in the space?
Okay, I think I should just go first. I think space making is very, very important. And a lot of the times, for like when you identify as both Black and Muslim, like you have a little limited spots, and like there's not a lot of spaces. You know, you always feel like that odd one out. So space making is really important because it's a space where you feel comfortable, you feel like your authentic self. You know, you don't have to worry about code switching. And I feel like a lot of the time us Black people, we feel like we have to code switch because we are representing both Muslim and Black. Like if we do something, all eyes on us, right? So it's important that we find a certain spot or a certain like a community or a group where we could truly be ourselves, and then we don't have to really hide any part of ourselves. So like I can talk about my culture and like no one's gonna like look at me like, well, what are you saying? Or like I can talk about my Islamic beliefs and no one would look at me and like, or like no one would want to participate. And so a lot of the time, like, when you're part of these other spaces that you don't feel welcome, you always try your best to try to fit in, and you kind of lose that your identity. So like you kind of lose your like like what truly is you. So yeah, I just can't emphasize how much space making is important for literally everyone, and especially for like us Black Muslims. And yeah.
I could add to that. To start off with, I really liked what you pointed out about just inclusivity having or being connected to feeling comfortable. So, and I know you asked like that question in twofold, so define inclusive and then space making. So my interpretation would be that inclusivity has to do with like your environment that you're in and how comfortable you are, or how well set up that space is for allowing you to address your opinion, especially when it differs from the other people you're in that space with. And then space making I would define that more as an action. So it's something that would take intentionality and would mean leading by example in terms of doing things like initiating like hard conversations and just making people feel seen and heard wherever they are. And so one example that I brought up before in the past, just to highlight like the concept of space making, is if you're in like a boardroom meeting, for example, I feel like most people lean towards just if you hear an idea or an opinion or a suggestion that you were thinking of or was in line with something you agree with, your first like thought is to like readily say out loud like, oh yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, or yes, exactly, like I agree with you. But you wouldn't have the same reaction to something that wasn't aligned with your opinion. And so just checking for things like that is why I would say space making is more about like the actions that you take in just making other people feel seen and heard.
I like the, sorry, are you, okay, you're done. Okay, sorry. I like the points that you both made. You guys made really good points, and my answer or my interpretation of it is very similar to your guys's. My definition of an inclusive space, or even just space making in general, is making or creating a sense of comfort, right? And to me, a sense of comfort is where you feel like you could be vulnerable if you want to. You don't, like one of the panelists mentioned, you don't have to worry about code switching or subconsciously filtering out or trying to act a certain way. You feel at home, you feel like a homey peace, you feel at peace. And just having that sense of comfort and that strong community foundation in a space where it allows different energies and different forms of vulnerabilities to be presented is something that is part of space making. And by being vulnerable, you're able to remove any of that negative energy that you might have picked up through the long day of like just code switching, and then you just feel safe. And I think it's just a beautiful feeling.
Thank you so much. So much of what you all said resonated so deeply. I think, yeah, this emphasis on code switching is something that is so prevalent for marginalized communities. And like you said, Ormia, like straddling the line between representing the like Black community and a Muslim community as well, like identities that have been so like immensely politicized. And how do you bring that back to your body, and how do you kind of move in the way, like having that knowledge? So thank you for bringing light to that. I guess kind of highlighting what you said, Bashira, about how well spaces are set up to allow you to exist. I love that as well, because I think that really puts the onus on these dominant institutions to change the ways that they have gone about being discriminatory in the way that they're set up. So kind of in segueing off of that, I'm wondering if any of you can share some experiences of feeling welcomed or empowered by spaces that have like really recognized and acknowledged your identity as Black Muslim youth.
I could go first this time, just so we're switching up the order of things. I think I wouldn't have to think or look too far back. I feel like my current co-op is a prime example of a space where I've never thought to feel unwelcomed, or there's never been a negative feeling associated with my environment. And that's been a really interesting shift. It's the first time that that's ever happened in my life, particularly because I'm the only Black person, I'm the only Muslim person, and I'm the only female in my department. So all those different identities independently, I'm the only representation of that at my workplace, which is like an oil and gas industry. And so I think like the distribution of people there is like 70% white male. So to exist across all those three identities and that intersectionality, I was really nervous like going into the space. I didn't know how people would like react to me. And it's just, I wouldn't say that I felt welcomed because I didn't feel unwelcomed. So how people interact with me on a day to day has never felt like they were throwing or using certain stereotypes or prejudice about how I was meant to act, or how I was meant to like reply emails or go about my day and all sorts of like day-to-day activities. There was never an expectation. It was almost like from the moment I entered the space or that workplace and up until this point, it's always been, let's see how she chooses to show up and take things from there. And that's been really amazing to just experience.
I really love what you said about how you felt welcome because they didn't make you feel unwelcome. And that's like a really good point. For me, I would say my example that comes to mind would be when I was doing the 2 programs of Radius SFU. So I had the experience of working with Ilhan, who's an amazing person, and she was the health program manager, as well as Hal and Shakan, who were both the facilitators there. And I would say that definitely my definition of an inclusive space really came from that experience. Both Ilhan and Hala, they're both Black. Ilhan is her ethnic background is Somali, and Hala is Sudanese like mine. And Shakan was also a person of color. So they all really both understood and knew how to create a space where all of us really felt welcomed and, empowered. So a part of that program, what they did was they started off the program with a 3-day virtual retreat, and virtual because of like COVID and everything, but we were able to connect with one another, and it was just really beautiful. And it was just, they were through that connection and that virtual retreat, like I didn't know to realize it back then, but it really created like a safe environment or a community where we felt like a level of vulnerability to present our authentic self very quickly and very early on, which is not always the case for me. Being in spaces, a non-inclusive space, you kind of have to filter a little bit, but it was really nice in that space where how it was really inclusive. And they also would bring out the session by asking us, how are we doing? And sometimes it would be like through gifts. And it was really important, right? How we all felt and the energies we came into that space, and we were really allowed to talk about anything. And that was just really something that you don't always get to have, which was really great. And even something small as turning off the camera, right? If we were having a long day or we're not feeling like, mentally ready there to open up the camera and stuff like that. And, Hala would do this thing where we would do meditation, and it really helped a lot in terms of the negative energy that we may had throughout the day, or even just a little bit with the Zoom fatigue. So I really look forward to every day for the session for the meditation part. and through all these behaviors, really, and Han Hala and Shakhan, they indirectly emphasize taking care of ourselves and prioritizing our mental health, which also I felt like played a role into making that like a safe space for everyone in that program.
So for me, thankfully, like I have never had any like dramatic like event occur where like I didn't feel safe in a certain like organization or club. But for me, an example I would probably give was just recently I've joined my school's MSA, Muslim Student Association, and I went in and like fortunately I was the only Black person there, but I went in with this mindset like at least like everyone here is Muslim. At least I can, share that part of myself, right? But what eventually happened was that I've created this like amazing group of like sisters, and now I call them sisters, but we've just created this amazing group where like I could truly be my authentic self, and they'll always remind me of how much how much of an amazing person I was to them, and how much like I was like impacting them in a way, and I really appreciated that. And I just like even being the only Black person, I never felt like I was, the black sheep. I never felt like I was not a part of that circle. And it was just amazing to just see like how like just beginning of the semester adjusting to university, I was so lost, and I just had so much going through with like just my life, and I didn't know who to reach out to. So just like meeting them in the prayer room and then slowly like going to the events, I just built this amazing relationship. And I know they're all watching right now, so I really appreciate for like everything that they've done for me. And like even though we've known each other for not too long, I feel like we truly have built a relationship that will truly like last for long. But yeah, so I've also like I've like gone to mosque and things like that, and I've joined clubs. So it's really it's amazing to just feel like myself, and even being like the only Black Muslim person. I just never had to worry about like there was thoughts of like, oh my God, they might not like me for this and that. But yeah, it's just amazing to feel like truly accepted for being in those spaces.
Wow, yeah, I hear you. I think what like I'm thinking through after the three of you are saying that is kind of maybe the pressure that you feel before entering those spaces, or you're trying to like kind of like predict what people are going to say and how you have to like filter yourself in response to that. But I think also what's coming through is this emphasis on like collective prayer or meditation in Sahar's case, and these different kind of actions that you take part in. I hope it's okay for me to like ask like as a follow-up question, how do you feel like Islam kind of helps you build a community in that sense? Like, does it feel like when you're praying together or meditating together that that's something that all of you can kind of ground yourselves through?
Yeah, for me, just when sometimes like, we go through these, like I was going through a mental health issue and that kind of thing. So it's just beautiful talking about like, your just spiritual level, and with them to just kind of like connect with you, and you can get really dig deep with those topics, and just like you could truly say, because like I know I don't feel like I'm being judged, because they also share their flaws and things that they're working on. So like with the religious aspect, it's just just beautiful, because like you can't like sit in a classroom and talk to your partner sitting next to you about like what you're going through. I mean, you can't even say like mashallah or inshallah to them, or like you can't even like, it feels so like for me, like, oh, I'm gonna pray, and they just look at you like, but when you're with those spaces with like those sisters, you say, oh, I'm gonna pray, and they're like, okay, let's go together. So when times like that, like I truly value the most.
Oh, that's beautiful. I wish we were all in person so we could pray together. I guess a question for all of you again is, how have your experiences kind of made you conscious of your identity? So for instance, do you have a specific experience you can recall within a space that made you reflect on how your identity influences how people perceive you?
Okay, I can go first. I feel like with spaces like that, you can like off the bat with school. Like school is like when you go to elementary and high school, it's like you're kind of forced to go to these schools and like, just yeah. So basically, I feel like when I was younger, like being like the only Black person in my classroom, and I didn't have a lot of friends. And so off the bat, I would kind of like be like, is it because I'm Black, or is it because I'm like, it was just so hard not to blame that part of me because it was the only difference. So I was like, why are people not wanting to be my friends? Why am I being left out of the circle? And why are these girls not talking to me? So yeah, so I would just feel so left out, and I would just blame part of my identity, and it would like I would just try so hard to fit in, and what I would do was like try to learn more about their culture and try to learn about what they're interested in, and it was just kind of sad because it's like I just can't be myself. And like even like I remember like going to the mosque, and it was just like I was like a minority there, and like just when my teacher would just treat me a little different, I just couldn't help but blame my Blackness for that. And I was just like, is it because I'm Black, that's why my teacher doesn't like me? So yeah, a lot of the time, like I feel like a lot of us Black kids, like growing up in this Western world, that we go through this, and what we want to do is like we feel like we want to just like change ourselves, but I was like, that's not possible. So but yeah, I feel like that's something that like I've had to go through. And then something that I'm just thankful that I learned to like just grow and try to find my space and try to find spaces that where I felt welcomed and just be myself, my authentic self.
I would say for me, I think I look at my interpretation of this question is both from I think there's both positive and negative experiences that can make you cautious of your identity. Definitely being cautious of how I talk or how, and just being having that concern. Definitely in code switching. I think I was doing it since for years now, to the point it became an automatic thing. And like every now and then I may or may not catch myself because of how automatic it came. Like it became as of a habit. I think in terms of the positive that really helped, like with my experience, definitely seeing Black excellence and success would be one of them. Is just when you like witness Black excellence, you just feel a sense of happiness and pride because you're not just proud for them for succeeding that as a woman, but as a Black person as well. Whether it's just, seeing it on, I think there were two Black CEOs last year and in Fortune 500, and they made history doing so. Or even just seeing some of my family or family friends, or even my friends who were succeeding, like that. The one of Hala working with Radius SFU and doing her master's, or whether it was my friend Dania who was studying like cognitive systems and how they were really my role models growing up. And I think also as well the beauty standards, I would say, which kind of ties into the point one of the panelists made, how just growing up in the West a little bit, you deal with a little bit of issues with the beauty standards since they're westernized in a way. So seeing that growing up as a kid, and then when social media became more prevalent and you notice the blackfishing and everything, it's just a little bit of a slap in your face. And I would say another experience would be positive would be when I was in Sudan. I was able to connect with my culture, learn more about my heritage, and I really just kind of learned to fall in love with my culture, my heritage, and even learning the language and connecting with family. So yeah.
I guess now that just listening to both of you talk, like I'm going to try and skew my answer to Taylor, what you brought up, because I think you both brought up like really interesting points. And to start with, like the concept or the mention of like adapting to Western culture, I couldn't help thinking back to high school. So I know I mentioned or alluded to it a little in my background or the first question on my intro, where I grew up primarily with non-Muslims, like just in terms of the spaces I was in, like the private schools that I went to, like in Nigeria, and then coming here, I went to a high school that was maybe a little more diverse in terms of racial diversity, but not a lot of Muslims. Again, I would say less than 5%, and that would translate to, sorry, my engineering brain is going to, but that translates to like maybe two or three other people that I could do things like fast with during Ramadan, that we could remind each other about like, oh, time to pray, or like locations to pray in, or certain times I would have to pray alone. So just it was definitely a pressure to adapt to Western cultures, because that was the only way at the time I thought or saw as a way to fit in, or I just saw as the formula. Like no one was there, again, because of lack of representation, to tell me that there are other pathways to take. And I think it was Sahar that mentioned the thing of like Black successful people, which is something that really allowed me to pivot away from that pathway when I was between the age of like 12 to 16. Well, it's like, I think one of my interests is like playing basketball. And then I had found out when I was around 16 about this woman that played in like a jilbab. And for some people, if you don't know what the term is, it's basically like a full covering where it's just like your eyes that are left like exposed or you can't see through. And I just found that so impressive and just like really interesting. And I'm like, for her, because in the environment that we're in as well, there was no one else there for her to see and be like, okay, like this is something I can do comfortably. And I was like, for you to just be that proactive in expressing your own identity, even without like seeing examples of guidance, it was like that was one really big push for me to be like, okay, like I can take back control of how people perceive me. I don't need to be guided by what's trending in that sense, but what my identity dictates that I already naturally like. So those 2 points really got me thinking. Thank you to the other panelists.
Also, I just want to, like, for those who don't know, like, Sahar touched on code switching, and basically code switching is something that like Black people have to do. Like, so it's like, when you're with like your Black friends or your family, you can like act a certain way, talk a certain way, but it's like, oh, you go to school or you go to other places, you have to like kind of switch the way you talk. And that's a lot of stuff that like I also have to do, and a lot of us have to do, because it's like, if you start talking of like, also I'm not saying like we talk all ghetto and stuff, but I'm saying like if we were to talk the way we really talk, like people are going to be like, what is she saying? Like, because like you also have to realize like you are a Black person, and you kind of like don't want to like have those stereotypes, or like you don't want people like look at you differently and like stereotype other people, other Black people. So yeah, I like that you touched on code switching. And with Bashira, I liked how you were talking about like looking up to people, and like the people, like the girl with the jilbab. Like I felt like when I was in high school, like being the only one, back in my mind I was just like, I'm gonna run for these positions and be in leader, so that other Black girls can, and other Muslim girls can look at me and be like, oh, she's a hijabi, and she has this position, or she's Black and she's in this position. So a lot of time, like I never got to see that, and so when I saw those opportunities, I had that mindset of like taking it, and like if I can take it, I will, and so that I can hopefully inspire other group of people and other the generation after me.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess a question I have to follow up with that is how, like in the journey of finding community and finding belonging, how did you stay steadfast and confident in your identity, if that makes sense?
Okay, I guess I can go. With that, like, I feel like it's really hard, and it's like, you have your moments where you just kind of want to break down, and you feel like just giving up, and like you kind of like ask yourself, like what's the point? And if like someone like you hasn't gotten this far, like why bother going forward? And it's really hard to find like that inspiration and that person that you want to look up to. But I feel like a lot of the times what like I tend to do is just go forward, like just keep pushing, and like just continue what I'm doing and not like kind of giving up on who I am and just be my true self and like kind of stand up for what I want, like what I believe in, and not like, you know, push back. And if there's someone there to like say otherwise, like if I had my beliefs like and what I want to say, like just try not to feel like, you know, like just try not to belittle yourself, honestly. And so yeah, like, you know, the world just keeps going, and what we need to do is just, you know, try to catch up and try to just keep pushing forward, because, you know, the world will not live the next day while you live tomorrow, right? The day before. So yeah.
And to add to that a little, I think one other thing that was really helpful and almost forced me to practice as a skill was just listening to myself and building my self-awareness. Because I started noticing while I interacted with like diverse range of communities, like people that I could align with and other people not so much. It was a thing where after certain conversations, and I don't know if like there's something that's very common. I feel like it is. I don't want to generalize. After certain conversations, like there's a feeling I get once I walk away from a good conversation where I was authentically myself versus when I wasn't. And so just listening to that feeling, I would go back to my room or like retreat to myself. And maybe like later that night, I'll be thinking, oh, why did I say that? Or why did I say it this way? Or why didn't I go further in detail about this opinion that I had as I wanted to? So it's like just listening to myself and trying to reduce the number or frequency of times when I felt like I wasn't showing up authentically in conversations was a really good almost way of checking myself along the way.
I would, adding on to what you said as well, listening to yourself, I agree with you 100% is really important. In that terms, I definitely, that ties into what I have as well, like in my head. In a sense, listening to yourself, noticing like how, like checking on yourself constantly, making sure that how you're feeling. If you're not feeling good, take the moment to step aside, clear your mind, even if it's just a walk, meditation. And this like answer might touch down to something you asked earlier, Marianne, which is also like, yes, in some ways, meditation, dua, they, not some ways, but meditation and dua, they both usually help in terms of like what you're dealing with. So I would say those two really help. It could be something small. If I get the chance or the opportunity to visualize a place, right? One of my favorite places, which I found really helpful, which is where, you know, close to where I live. It's like a bench by a river. So I would just imagine myself sitting there, just watching the waves go by, and that really helps a lot in terms of like filtering out some of these negative things. Even self-positive talk, silently communicating silently to yourself, or just positive thinking, like it's just another habit that is really useful as well.
Yeah, and also like just talking to people like, you know, your family, your siblings, your parents, or like your friends who truly know you, and like ask for those advice, because, you know, they know you as well. And so like just trying to communicate, and like also taking the next step further, like talking to, you know, like if you, like, let's say for instance you're not feeling inclusive in a space, talk to the person who's leading it. Like, you know, you have that right to you know, feel good about a space that you're joining in. Like you should feel welcome. So if you don't, you know, you have that right to kind of speak up. So I think it's like so important that like that's something that we do, and we don't just because like they're not accepting of us, it's like that's not okay. So yeah, I think it's really important that we speak up. And then also like I do also like pray, and that also helps, just like late night prayers and just kind of speaking to the creator and talking about whatever you're going through, because truly like I believe that God knows me more than I do. So it's just nice to just be able to like make prayer, make dua, that kind of thing.
I really like how you kind of went more on like the prayers and stuff, because I agree with you. And you're 100% right. Like God knows you more than you know yourself. And it's just I think the whole purpose of dua really in this like life is just to help you deal with things, the stress, and just able to pour out your heart. Because like you said, once you do that, you feel more like at peace. You feel like all of a sudden all that like the burdens your soul really had in the beginning kind of went away. So I really love how you talked about that.
Yeah, there's a saying in Islam that says, like Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein. And that has always given me so much comfort to know that. Like there are so many times where I'm like in sujood, I'm in prayer, and I don't even know how to put words to what I'm feeling. And you just like don't even say anything. You're just like letting your heart speak for you. And that's such a beautiful, like grounding experience. I'm really kind of in awe of what you're all talking about in terms of like finding that um, collective belonging and stuff within family and friends. I think that that's so important. How have like your families kind of helped you, I guess, like go forth in what you're doing? I don't know if that makes sense.
I would say my family is definitely a huge, huge support. I don't think I would have been where I'm at today without my family. I know like some of the stress I deal with, like I just like, tell my parents, I cry about it. Like so I can't count the amount of ugly cries I had to do with did with my parents. And they really like they're able to calm me down. They give me advice, they tell me which direction to go. And I would say that my parents are both and my family in a whole really are really one of my biggest supporters, and they really pushed me towards everything I wanted to do when they were and even with me changing a lot of my ideas on things I want to do and what not to do, they were 100% supportive of it, and they generally tried to understand. So I would say for me, I don't think I would be really anywhere that I am right now without the support of my family.
To add on to that, I thought of something very funny that like my mom specifically does. But before like speaking on that, I feel like I will echo the same sentiments as Sarah, where my family, my parents specifically, really showed me how to navigate like being Muslim amongst like everything else. Like, because again, it should set the stage for how you lead your life and your lifestyle. And so something that my mom like always does when it comes to decisions is making like a sticker where it's like, oh, like you don't know what to do, or maybe it was just like even just moving to UBC, right? So I had like a bunch of different universities that I wasn't sure about. It was still like the same program that I wanted to go into. And it's like my first thoughts at the time was, well, what's the different criteria between these schools I should be looking at, like things like cost, etc. Like, and then it was just amazing to watch that. The first thing my mom did when I was telling her about these things or sharing my sentiments was, oh, okay, like we're going to like organize like a prayer group together and make a sticker and like see what comes from that. And so just having those examples for putting like Islam first was really like really honing, and it was something that I internalized and I'm still internalizing because it's something they continue to do and just set the stage for and teach me to do as well.
Yeah, so for me, like, I feel like like my parents obviously did not go through exactly what I went through, but it's just nice to kind of know that like they like just them praying for me and like in times where I really need it, like I feel like their prayer like is what has like really helped me. And I have like my siblings, and even though like my siblings are younger than I am, it's just nice to like go home and just talk about my day and literally everything that has happened. And like, I feel like with my siblings, I could really be who I am and express every part of myself to them, and just hearing their advice, or like, late night calling my friends and talking about like things that are happening and things that are like, things that are bugging me. It feels truly nice to like have that even one friend that who kind of understands what you're going through, and like you don't really have to explain much, but then she'll like truly understand what you're going through. So I feel like those are like so like I those people are just so important. And like yeah, I value those people because like I just can't imagine like going through so much and then like going home and like literally have no one to speak to, or like get those advice, because sometimes I feel like I kind of know what I want to do, but it's just nice to know that they also believe and like are supporting me. And it's also like I also have a specific like a Oromo group here located in Vancouver. So it's just also nice to have their support, and they're always telling me like, we got your back. So when you have those supportive group of people, it's so much easier to like keep going, moving forward, because you just don't want to like let them down, or not even that, but you just kind of like you feel motivated to just keep pushing forward. Yeah.
I want to like add something else. Both of you guys brought up some points as well. I would say 100% I agree. Like istikhara really helped. Like my mom as well, she would tell me as well, like do istikhara, it really helps her. She told me like how istikhara helps her make her decisions as well. And istikhara 100% helps. I don't like it really plays a role in making decisions. I would say also like what one of the other panelists mentioned about for having your friends, right? I think I'm grateful enough that I have a very great support system, right? Where sometimes some of the things that we go through life, I'm able to talk with them about it, and it just like really helps you understand some ideas, and it gives you a whole nother perspective, which is also something I'm really grateful about.
Yeah, like for me, like I think one thing I started incorporating in my life was like tahajjud prayer, like the one of the night prayers, and it was just a life-changing thing, because it was just that night moment where at night where everyone is sleeping, and just having that connection with God, and you feel like I feel like that's when I just all my cries, like throughout the day I'm like trying to cry because I'm so stressed out, but I can't cry. But then it's like when I'm at night, I feel like I could just like all my feelings just come out, and it's just beautiful because I know that like it's just me and God at that moment. So I like really like value those times. But yeah, like what you said with friends, and like trying to like how important it is to have Muslim friends. Like I remember when we were with my friends, we were trying to like we were applying for this position, and one thing we would do was like remind ourselves to wake up for tahajjud prayer, or like send each other videos on how to like do something better. So it's just like it was one of the nice things that I've had through those times of like difficulties and stress.
I think Marianne had a problem with her connection. Is she still in the chat? I know she said she had some issues. Let me see if she's no, she's not here. So I guess I will ask you guys just a question then. We've been having some great discussions so far, and I'm learning so much from you three, and thank you so much for coming. And so I guess like my question, since we're talking about experiences, do you feel that Black Muslims are represented within various spaces, and does that affect your experiences within the spaces?
To go first, I think that's an interesting question, because I guess in terms of perspective, every individual would vary in terms of like how you'd interpret like a certain identity being represented in a space and what that looks like. So to start off with, I'll say maybe being represented in a space as a Black Muslim just means being able to have conversations that primarily affect us, with or without there being like someone that represents the identity present. So I'll give an example of what I mean. So let's say Ramadan was around the corner, and it is around the corner. I would say being represented, or being able to represent like the Black Muslim identity being representable in a space, would mean how people interact about something like Ramadan, which is generally just acknowledged by Muslims, would let me know, like in a conversation, for example, if they've done not necessarily their homework, but they followed like a curiosity to like search up or look up, oh, when does Ramadan start? Okay, what do Muslims have to do during that time? Like, oh, are they fasting, etc.? And being able to like honor some of these things that we do during the month, regardless of if there's any one person within that conversation telling them all the right answers. And so I think that's to answer that first question. That's how I would know that a space is represented by Muslim, not necessarily like a Black Muslim. And for the Blackness part of it, that's something that I'm still answering right now because I don't think that's something that's very represented anywhere. It's been my experience that I'm usually the one to navigate or educate people about those identities and how there can be stereotypes about being a Black person or stereotypes about being a Muslim. But where those come together, it's almost like there's a question mark there for people about, oh, is there a certain rule here that I don't know about? And yeah, it's just interesting to watch. But yeah.
I like some of the points you made, and I do agree with you that there are like when it comes to being like the identity of Black and Muslim and intersex people, they tend to get surprised. They don't accept, like they don't expect it. The right word. They don't expect that there are Black Muslims, which is really interesting. I would say that I agree with you. I don't think we're represented enough in spaces. I think we're heading towards that direction of representation, but we're not there yet. If we take a look, for example, at politics, right? Ilhan, who is an American congresswoman, I think she's the only, if I'm not mistaken, she's the only Black Muslim there who is a very prominent figure in terms of the politics. And then we look at Canada. I think there's one of the ministers is also a Black Muslim. And before that, that was really not the case. And in terms of even one there's like a counselor I think I came across that was also a Black Muslim. So I feel like we're heading to that direction, but I think to reach that representation stage across various spaces, it's going to take some time. And I don't know, maybe because there isn't much representation, this tends to be like what one of the panelists says, a question mark when people notice that the two identities intersect. And it seems almost kind of impossible to some of these people. But yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with both of you. I feel like there's still not a much representation, but it's just so important to have these talks for like for Muslims to like accept these Black people, and like for us to like just normalize having these conversation and not be like, oh, you're Muslim, because in the end of the day we still like we can't avoid this part of our identity. Like I just, for example, like going to the mosque, the local mosque, like there was hardly any Black people, and it was something that was hard to see was like having like a Black sheikh or a Black teacher in your classes, these Muslim school classes. So one thing I really wish was that the mosque would like reach out to these Black teachers and like tell them, oh, can you like help teach at our Muslim schools or like our madrasa classes? Because then if I had seen that growing up, it would have like made me feel so much better and not like shocked every time I saw a Muslim Black teacher, like, oh my God, is this actually happening? Like, am I seeing someone that looks exactly like me? Like, it was also hard enough to not see that at school. Like, literally had no Black teacher from elementary to high school, like, and had like my first Black teacher in like university, and that was kind of it. But yeah, it's just so important that these organizations, these Muslim organizations, look at the position, these higher level positions, and see like, is this a diversity? Because yes, we're all Muslims, but we cannot ignore this part of our identity.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think what you're touching on there is that it's the role of kind of the institutions to do that work and to make sure that Black Muslims and also like all like marginalized communities are represented. That's so important. What do you think could be done specifically in educational settings that could enhance that?
I just get like right away, just reach out to people, like start getting in touch with these people, because I feel like a lot of the time you don't hear about what's really happening. So it's just super important that like these people in these institutions are like seeking out and looking out at their like who are they hiring, and are they doing a good job of like hiring every person of color, and and like, you know, seeing that part, because it's just so hard not going to a room and like, you know, you're always the only Black person. So it's just so important that like even though I'm the only Black person, like I still kind of want to feel included, and I kind of want to see other people like just like me, and like, yes, Muslim and Black.
I like the point you made. I would agree with you on that. My answer is very like pretty much the same. I do believe that they do need to reach out and they do need to put more effort into recruiting more Black Muslim teachers. In terms of my experience, I would say BC Muslim school is probably the only experience I had with having like two Black Muslim teachers after I left. This is excluding Sudan. I never really had a Black Muslim teacher afterwards, or even a Black teacher in general. And yes, I do believe that these institutions need to do more work, but not to the point where it becomes tokenism, where they only hire someone because they are Black or they're Muslim. They hire them because yes, they have the qualities, but also as a representation, so people could look up to them and know that feel more comfortable in the space, and just see someone that looks like them.
To add on a very short response to that, because I agree with I echo the same sentiments that I've heard in response to this question, is for educational institutions to just practice more of asking questions and actually listening for the responses you get back. So it's not enough to just know the questions you should be asking. It comes, at least in UBC, it can come in the form of, for most like universities in Canada, to my experience, a lot of the diversity work looks like sending out surveys and waiting to get like responses back, like hosting events for marginalized groups or setting up like activity clubs, etc. And it's like those different things tend to happen in silo. And in my opinion, I feel like the one way to interconnect like all of that type of work or all of those initiatives that are driving towards the same goal is communication, and making sure that what you're getting back in response from one group is what you're feeding to the other, and just being transparent and loud about that, and listening for the responses to get the surveys, and actually like executing or asking follow-up questions when you hear back recommendations from people that identify as Black, female, Muslim, or all of those things, about what the next steps are, because it's work that is going to continue to go on until it's not needed to, I guess.
Perfect. And if we kind of want to bring the scale down from the institution of academia and universities and down kind of to the classroom itself, how can professors, or especially like faculty who don't identify with the Black Muslim experience, do that in a way that's not tokenizing, or even in a way that's not compartmentalizing those identities? Because, for example, like in my degree, I've noticed so much, we'll have like a week on like Black people and a week on Muslim people and then a week on like Asian representation. And that's clearly not meaningful enough. So how do you think that faculty can address that and kind of merge those identities together?
I could go first. I don't know if this might be more unconventional a response, but I don't think the mindsets for things like that from faculty, for example, should be to address it. Like there's nothing to address. Like someone's racial identity, for example, isn't an issue to address or something to allocate to a certain time to deal with, as if it's something that's pending a solution. So to give like more of an abstract answer, which I'm sorry for, is I think the first step is to change like the wording that's even used to accommodate for marginalized groups, and your approach to that and your mindset for that, I guess.
Okay, I guess I can go next. I feel like with like let's say when you're in a classroom, it's just very important. Like, let's say, you're talking about a history of like what happened in Africa. Like, it's important that like, your professor also does his job and not kind of like, hey, points at a Black person, do you want to talk for the class? Like, it's kind of like not our job. Like, I feel like if there's something that it's like said wrongly, I would gladly like talk and share my point of view or like my experience. But it's also important that these professors also know what they're saying and not kind of like, let me see if there's a Black person here and like let them do the talk. So yeah, well, it's important that they're also educated on the topics and the issues that are happening and that are going on, and not also say anything wrong or anything that's kind of offensive, that kind of thing.
And I agree with what you said. I do believe part of it, I do believe the answer to this question would be that the teachers educating or even the profs educating themselves. I would use an example for this question would be one of my friends, back in high school, her high school teacher was talking to them about history, and he was saying to them that he went as far as to educate himself, to telling them that, history is not always accurate. You want to be careful. The person that writes like these books, they could have a certain bias towards these certain groups. And he went as far as educating himself on certain topics where he doesn't come off as arrogant. He doesn't come up racist. Like, he was also very careful with his wording. And it's just, like you said, doing it like for 1 week is not enough. And it's not, and it might come off, it might not be like, they might have the good intentions with it, but it might come off as offending someone or come off as arrogant. So I do believe that even just a part of it, yes, educating, but I think it also I believe that institution in some ways plays a bigger role than the profs themselves. I'm not saying the profs, they don't play a role, they do play a role. But I believe the institution plays a bigger role because they're the ones that have these rules and they have these guidelines, and they're the ones that bring these profs. So that's why I believe the institutions have a bigger role.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, it's not just universities, but it also starts with when you're young, like in elementary. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't even know what like Black History Month was until like mid high school. And even then, it wasn't like taken serious. So I just never thought like, oh, it's not something that we do here in Canada. But it's just so important that we start with the younger kids and that we have these topics and we discuss them at a young age. And we like growing up, I just never felt like my Black side was really important, and I just like, it was kind of like brushed under the carpet, kind of thing. And so I just avoided that. So it just took time for me to like, grow up and truly like question my identity and be like, oh, like I am a Black Muslim. I can't avoid that. I can't ignore that. And I need to accept that. And I need other people to also be willing to like, share that part of my identity and like them to welcome and accept that as well. So I definitely think it should start with like, elementary kids and go up to like, university and like, have these conversations and not have it like a 1 day thing and then let's ignore it. Like we did our job, but let's just ignore it now. So yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you as well on this part. I as well did not realize that, about what like February being Black History Month. I didn't even know that until I would say even towards the end of high school, beginning of college. And it's just that it's not really taken seriously. Based on my experience, I haven't seen institution or like even from a young age, it's not really something that's really taken seriously. So it's just, even I would add on to that, even taking maybe like, as you said, a young age, in all these institutions, taking Black History Month more seriously. And it's not to the point where it's offensive. I have one of my friends, she's actually here in the meeting. She was telling me how her school, when Black History Month, what they did was they didn't add any context. All they added was some spice, I think some potato thing, mashed potatoes or something. And that was it. They didn't go, and it was on a display, so they didn't even go educating about it. There was so many stuff that they could talk about. They didn't talk about the importance of the spices or the importance of this particular meal, or even just the history, was just all of that. So it just makes you really like makes you wonder how important it is for them to take it seriously, if that makes sense. And
sorry, and what was sad for me, like in high school, I remember like our principal, he would talk about every other celebration that was going on, and then like it would come to like, Black History Month, and it was just kind of dead silent. And so like one thing I realized is like, we have the opportunity to speak up. So I like one thing I did was just like in the announcement, just kind of talk about Black history and what it meant. And I felt like that was just so important. It was like, no one really asked you to take that initiative. No one's going to ask you to, hey, like, you want to speak up for your cause. Like, no one's going to do that. So it's so important that we also tell, like, Black Muslims, like, hey, if you ever, feel like you want to talk about something, like, take it to, the admins, talk to them. Like, you have the right. There's nothing like, that nothing like the best you could do is just like talk and like kind of give your voice. And so it was amazing to just see like, I did that, and like a lot of people like in my grade, and not just in my grade but the whole school, like all the Black kids came up together and had these discussions. So yeah, I just learned a valuable lesson, which was just speaking up, and like, and if you see unjust, like, be the first to do something. And yeah.
yeah, what you said, again, I agree with you. And also, like, my friend did the same thing. Her name is Salma. She's in here in this meeting. She did that. She went and spoke up about it. She talked to the principal, and she ended up leading this. I think she started a Black club. Was it Selma? I think it was like a Black club at her school, and I don't think they had it there. So, like you said, speaking up is something very important, and she really took the initiative to do that. And I feel like for the next generations of Black Muslims, or even just Black people that who went to our high school, will end up, how do I say it? Will end up like kind of, I guess, celebrating the fruits of her hard work.
Yeah, and they would like definitely appreciate that, and like, the next generation of Black kids won't feel like, they won't feel isolated or unaccepted.
I have a kind of like a question about representation in terms of what you're talking about. I think earlier someone had mentioned, I think it was, I can't remember, but someone had mentioned like representation in the beauty industry. And I guess I'm wondering how you think that has affected your understanding of yourself and how that's kind of changing now. Sorry, I know it's kind of a diversion, but.
Yeah, no worries. I would say as a kid, and maybe this experience is a bit similar to yours. Blonde hair, the gifts of blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin. That was really what's considered, beautiful. And just as a kid, the amount of people that I came across that talked about, in middle school they actually they wish they didn't have their Black identity, or even were a person of color, they wish they had that pale skin, blue-eyed, blonde hair thing. And that was just kind of like, in a way, it causes a little bit of internalized self-hatred, right? And then as you get older, you get to have more, you get to meet more people. And for me, I met a friend who really, my own experiences did not help in some ways, but even I met a friend who was really important in me just for looking towards my identity in a positive direction. She really loved her. She's not Muslim, but she was also a Black person, and she really loved her skin tone. She loved her, her Afrocentric features, and that really helped me appreciate and embrace my identity side a lot, like in a positive way.
Yeah, I remember a story where my brother was telling me when he was like in kindergarten. He was like, he's like, yeah, I wanted a mohawk so bad when I was younger. And it was like kind of the thing where like, all the little kids, the white kids who had these mohawks, they were like known as the popular kids. And he was just like, I never wanted to be Black. He's like, the part of me, he's like, I just hated being Black. And then it was just like, it's like I kind of also went through the same thing where like I was just like, oh, I wish like I was lighter at least. I wish I was like, not this dark. And I realized like a lot of us Black kids, we unfortunately did go through that because we just didn't have a lot of people like to look up to who were like the same color, who were doing amazing things. Like those people weren't shown on TV or, so we were like just stuck here looking at the Western world and what they thought was, beautiful. And, just looking at the toys, all we wanted was the Barbie dolls. And what did they had? Like good hair, like straight hair, not good hair because not all hair, all hair is good. But so yeah, they looked white, blue eyes, that kind of thing. So it was just so hard at a young age, like just comparing yourself to that and kind of hating the way you look because, the people who you were showing to did not look like you.
Yeah, and almost to buttress like some of those points, I think now it's a little better, I want to say, in terms of what social media has done, in terms of how like more welcoming this platform, the different platforms we have now are. Like I know for me, and speaking in real time before I go back to like a past experience, like things like TikTok and Instagram, like seeing other people and embrace their Muslim identities and seeing where that crosses over with their cultures. Certain jokes that I see, for example, on TikTok, or like hints at, oh, like this person had the same like childhood experience in like Islamic school as I did. Like a lot of the like there were like little affirmations that I didn't realize at the time were compounding and allowing me to feel more self-affirmation and just be like, yes, like I can identify with this and this, and we're so willing and consistent in putting out their Muslim identities and how it crosses over with being Black, female, etc., and all these other things, and just like finding a space to like insert the fact that you're all these different identities was something that was just really comforting for me. And I guess another thing was since I grew up in Nigeria for the first 16 years of my life, like the majority of people around me were Black. So it was when I moved to Canada that there was mostly like this shift in the almost sort of distribution of racial groups that surrounded me. And for some time, I feel like as much as there was never like direct conflict as a result of it. So I've never, alhamdulillah, like experienced like a racial attack, for example, anything like that. There was some internal, I was contributing to how awkward I felt in certain spaces by just projecting how I thought people that were non-Black, for example, would react to me. So for example, if in high school, like I had a project to do, or even in university, I think first year, if I had a project to do with people that did not look like me, I would assume how they saw me, like even from the first day that we met, like, oh, like this person is thinking this, like, oh, why does she have like a headscarf on, or oh, she comes from Nigeria, or something like that. Like I'm already internally like assuming the stereotypes they're already like using to judge me with. And so, yeah, a lot of just that projection, and going back to the thing of like social media, like it's really just helped or dialed down along the way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it was just so hard, like, being the only Black person and like Muslim, it's so hard not to call out your identity and feel like the reason they don't want to talk to you or be, like want to be your friend was because, you just couldn't help but blame yourself for them not wanting to be your friend and that kind of thing. And also, like, I totally agree with social media. It's really helping a lot of people, like, just, feel empowered and feel accepted and feel like, they don't look ugly because they're Black, you know? And like with books too, you can go to the library and you see like these books for children and talking about like Black beauty. And I feel like that's just so important. Like, you know, with kids who grew up here and didn't grow up back home and see a lot of people like them, it's just so important to like educate them and talk about like just because they're Black doesn't mean any, like, you know, they're different. And I've also like, I remember one time I was taking my little brother to the park and a little kid was there and he looked at my brother and he said, he's Black. And then I took a minute and I was just like, well, should I respond to this? And I just said, yes, he's Black and he's beautiful, right? I was like, just because you're, you know, Black is beautiful. And that's all I said. I didn't need to educate this kid, but I could just tell him just right there and then that just being Black doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't mean anything else. And the kid just looked at me and he said, yeah, he is. And so, yeah, it's just important to just educate the little kids right there and then. And like, even, you know, my brother's going to kindergarten soon, but I really hope like when it comes to Black History Month, I hope his teacher is like reading them about books of Black history and that kind of thing. So just to normalize the kids so the kids can know, like, you know, being Black is something that is different and something that we should avoid talking about.
And I really love that, you know, how you handled the situation at the park with your brother. Honestly, you dealt with it really well, and you're right. Like, I think with kids, you definitely go with a different approach because they're so open into learning, and racism is definitely something that is learned and taught. So I think that like that approach is like, I really applaud you for that. So I really thank you for that. That kid is probably going to remember this for the rest of their life, as well as your brother too. And, you know, I think just like growing up, like that is something that we both needed, right? Growing up in this country. I feel like even these like little self books, like love books for, you know, the Black children is something that was also really much needed for not just us, but for people of younger generation. Because I think once you start out young, like letting them know how important, like, you know, how beautiful Black is and how important being Black is, they weren't necessarily, hopefully they don't go through what we went through in terms of like, oh, is it like, you know, was part of it like the self-hatred, part of it is that they don't want to be friends with us because we're Black or because we're Muslim, and having that, like, you know, dealing with the identity on both sides. So thank you for.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe to bring in kind of the identity of being women as well, I'm wondering if any of you would feel comfortable speaking about like your journey with the hijab and how it felt to kind of like don that and kind of like see yourself in that light as like a Black Muslim woman who is wearing a hijab, because there's obviously like even within the Muslim community there's a lot of like negative hierarchy between like Muslim women who don't wear the hijab, Muslim women who do, and there's like a lot of kind of like taboo and judgment around that. So
I would say that with the hijab, so I'm going to Islamic school kind of helped me in some ways, kind of pushed me towards wearing a hijab. I wore it, you know, as part of the uniform. Also, my parents were completely like fine. They told me to wear the hijab whenever I wanted to, whenever I was ready. You know, like I remember I would just be begging my parents sometimes when I go to them what's it called, to Walmart, just to wear a hijab. And, you know, I saw my mom wearing it, and, you know, my mom is a very beautiful woman, and I felt like with the hijab she looked even more beautiful. So, and just, you know, as you get older, I was like, okay, let me try it on. And I think that I wore it for school, but it was not until I was 13 that I wore it all the time. And honestly, for me, hijab, I really believe hijab is a choice. And whether or not you wear hijab does not make you a better Muslim. It's really what your character is. You know, I think with hijab, you have more, in a sense, you have that burden. I don't want to say burden as in it's negative, but you have that representation that you have to show people about how Muslims are. And, you know, I think when I was 13, I started to wear it, and it was an interesting journey because definitely when I was struggling with my identity, I was wearing it. I was the only one at my school who was wearing it. And then when I went to high school, again, I started to see a little bit more Black Muslims, but not that much. I think in terms of university, I really had one of my best friends who was also a Black Muslim, and she also wore hijab. And through the years of me wearing hijab, I really fell in love with it. I think when I was 11, I started to wear it, but not like fully, like how I was when I was 13. I took it off at some point, and then I realized that I needed to wear it back again because I really just it became a part of me, and I just felt like I separated something that was a part of me. I took it out of me, and I needed it back, if that makes sense.
For me, the thing was like I kind of grew up wearing the hijab. Like, obviously, like I was born and raised in a Muslim country, and so the struggle part was that like when you would get to school and when kind of like I felt like I didn't have a lot of friends, so I was like I can't change that I'm Black. I was like, maybe I can change and take off the hijab. Maybe then I'll feel more inclusive. So a lot of the time that was just a thing that I would constantly think about, and it was just like it was really hard to keep it on. But alhamdulillah, like at a time when it was so hard, I had like Muslim friends and they were wearing hijab, and I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. And I felt like that really pushed me and like just stick with my hijab, because it's like I'm going through this battle, but at least God sees and he's rewarding me for this. And just kind of like trying to realize the beauty of just wearing the hijab, and like no matter what, just don't give up and like continue wearing it. And it was even hard like on social media, like sometimes you would see a sister like, yeah, she might be hijabi, but then like on social media she could take it off, and you were like, my parents can't see me there. So I was like, what if I could take it off, then like maybe people would like me, maybe people would think I'm beautiful. And so that was also a thing that I was thinking of. But yeah, alhamdulillah, like it was something that I felt like God really, really helped me with, because it was just not easy. Like it was just something that, yes, I grew up wearing with, and it was kind of normalized. But then as soon as you get to, experiencing these other things in your life, and you kind of meet these people, and, society tells you like you look beautiful without it. And so, yeah, it was just a constant thing. And I just kind of had to remind myself, like, the rewarding for it is just so much beautiful. And I'm doing it for the sake of God. And if, like, God sees my struggle. And so, yeah, that was just to remind myself. But yeah, alhamdulillah for like just, holding it down till now. I still have it on, and I truly love it.
For me, I have a similar like story where I wore like the hijab, and in the most common sense, where like you have it wrapped like around your head growing up, and that was the contributing factor for it at the time was because one, my environment and being like in Islamic school, just seeing like other people around me that showed up that way, as well as like family members, for example, is what made me comfortable with it. But at the time, I didn't really understand why I was wearing it. And I think it was you, Sahar, that talked about like some of the attributes that's related to being representing yourself like as a hijabi or like a Muslim in general, because one aspect of it is like donning like the head covering, where it's like that's not the only aspect of it, but there was definitely a fear growing up, especially in high school, where it was like, well, how are people going to judge you for showing up in a head covering? And just how like it was almost like there was a thought in my mind where it's like, oh, maybe I introduced myself as this Black female, and then later on they find out that I'm Muslim. But because they found out my personality, first off, I'll give it a week or two, and then I'll let them know that I secretly go and pray. And the only way to really pass off that agenda or like to sell them the story was if I wasn't wearing a hijab, because in that way there would be no externally identifiable way of knowing that I was Muslim. So that was really like an interesting headspace to be in, and for a lot of reasons, including obviously the environment I was in and social like pressure for sure. And yeah, just coming out of it, I think one driving factor to start wearing a head covering was that I want to to be held accountable. And I know like you talked about a burden and then took that back a little, but I want to also, like Sahar, I think it was you that said that. I want to emphasize that that is a lot of the time how society views like people that wear like the hijab, or people that are just externally identifiable as Muslims, where it's like, oh, they have to be held to this like standard where we're looking at you, and if you do this, well, you're, even as a guy, like if you have a beard, for example, or if you're donning like a jilbab again, and you do this act, then oh, you're representing all Muslims, and this is the tone you're setting for everyone else. So there's also that fear of how you're representing people, but there's almost like good accountability that comes with it, where it's like, I want to be able to show that, oh, I identify externally as a Muslim, and then these are my characteristic traits. And alhamdulillah, like that's been going well so far. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what your point, back to my point earlier, is definitely we have to, in some ways, be careful what we do and how we act and how we behave, especially because a lot of us, we see on what's going on in the media. We don't want to give people more thoughts or negative thoughts or ideas about Muslims in general. So some ways we have to refers back to the code switching, where you have to be careful what you say, how you behave, how you act again, because it's like, okay, if I do this, they're going to think all Muslims do that. And it's a little bit of that concern. And one of the panelists made earlier, I agree with you on the struggle thing. Cause I went through like you go through that struggle a lot, especially when you're the only one, and the social pressure that you mentioned as well, that comes back to you struggling with your identity, and, you're wearing the hijab and everything. And I think eventually at some point when you reach a certain level in your life or age, right? And you're not exactly as worried about the social pressure as much anymore. That's when the falling in love really starts with the hijab.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I think at this point, we would like to invite anyone from the audience to submit any questions you have for the panelists in the chat. So as those kind of roll in, I'll ask them out loud to the panelists. But I guess while folks take a second to think of any questions, I have another one, because I think we're seeing a lot in the media, companies and corporations trying to include aspects of modesty and stuff into their kind of trends and stuff. So for example, there was like Nike who released that hijab, like that sports hijab a few years ago. There is now like a trend, like a balaclava trend, where it's kind of like a hat thing that you wear. And there's been a lot of discussion on that through like Muslim TikTokers that I follow, talking about how in a sense it is really inclusive, because it's showing that, like it's normalizing the act of covering your hair, but in another way it can feel really kind of like tokenizing, or in a sense like misrepresenting what it means to cover your hair. So I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts on that.
I think one thing, just specific to the examples that you were bringing up of tokenizing, I think I saw like a post or something that got me thinking the other day, where someone pointed out that in France, actually not to even go too far, because that could spark some controversy, in Quebec, for example, where like you have the limiting rule of, if you work for the government, if you work in like an educational institution, like there's certain restrictions on you not being externally able to identify or show like religious representation, shall I say. And so when you bring up the idea of the balaclava, for example, it almost seems dismissive to the Muslim identity sometimes, and hurtful, when it's like, oh, okay, like you can cover your hair in a certain way or just enough that it's fashionable, but when the reason behind why you're doing it is tied to religion, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when you have all these legislative laws, policies, etc., coming out to almost like restrict you because of an individual or internal like choice that you've made. So it's something that's really interesting to me, and just really sad in general, to be quite honest. But yeah.
With the whole balaclava, right? Because I like for the longest time I was like calling it balaclava. But yeah, with that, I feel like it's just so important. Like when you see those TikTokers who are not Muslim and are putting it on, just kind of like share like, hey, Muslims also wear it and it's called a hijab. Like if you can at least say that, that would like make me so happy because I want people to like, so a lot of people don't know what Islam is or the hijab. So I want people to be aware. So like rather than you just wearing it and not like going when you're on social media kind of sharing what hijab is and that kind of thing, like yeah, like I just rather like you to like yeah, okay, you can wear it for the winter and that kind of thing, but like please like we have these platforms we can share and spread awareness, so please spread awareness on the unrest that's happening in like France, and like talk about that thing, like just share like a thread, like something on like on your story. That's literally the bare minimum. So yeah, I think it's just so important that like they also acknowledge that a lot of people don't have the right to wear them, and they want to wear them because it's a part of their religion, and you get to wear it because for fashion. So yeah.
Marianne, I guess the point you made about it being more, I guess, making it more normalized, I really did not think of that. I think I saw one TikToker talk about it, and that really, in a way, like I kind of agree with what she was saying. She wasn't like black or Muslim, she wasn't a Muslim person or even a black Muslim, but she was saying that um, that she will not be participating in it because wearing a baklava, because she was saying until that girls that wear hijab are not discriminated against, and these around the world for wearing a hijab, whether it's like workplace or even by like France and Quebec and I think India now as well with the hijab ban, until that's like not like dealt with, she's not going to be participating in it. And because it's just I think it's, yes, in some ways it's like the point you brought up, definitely it's making it a little bit more normal, but at the same time you cannot ignore the fact that a lot of people are crucified for wearing the hijab, or they have to sit here and fight for wearing the hijab. You look at the Quebec teacher, she was fired because she wore the hijab. And is it really fair for this to become a trend when at the same time the same people of an ethnic group that are wearing the hijab are being crucified for it?
Yeah, and I feel like that's why it's so important to like spread awareness, like try to get these people to understand that wearing the scarf is a religious practice, and it means so much to those people who wear it. So yeah, I think it's so important that we not just us Muslims but other people, like we have social media these days and news can spread real fast. So yeah, and I have seen that video on TikTok too, and I really definitely agreed. She also talked about like how like black men just wearing a hoodie and they're like caught by the police. So that's also a thing to look at.
Yeah, thank you for problematizing those things. I think, yeah, an issue with social media is that a lot of these topics can be really reduced to like the bare minimum, but it's important to add the nuance, and I think you're all doing that. We have one question that's specific for Oromia. It reads, you mentioned your issues with colorism. How did you deal with them? I know as a Black community, colorism is an internal issue. Did you deal with colorism from other people within your own community? How did you deal with it? If you have any advice for dark-skinned Muslim hijabis, what would it be?
Good question. I feel like colorism, like surprisingly, also happens in the Black community. It's like, you when you have a sibling and that sibling is like a little lighter than you, they have like more attention and they're like called out for their beauty. And it was just super hard, like to like, and like not wish that you were a little bit lighter. And the thing I had to deal with was just like, or the thing I had to do really to help me with that was just accept, just like be happy with who I am. Just look at myself and be like, this is who I am. And I'm accepting of your beauty, because like it's something that God has given us. But like it's super, super hard. And I hate when like just your own Black community like just talks about how being light is just more beautiful. But that's the thing, it's like they grew up with that. Like to them bleaching is so common, and they like would even go ahead and suggest it to you to get bleached. But yeah, I think it's like when those adults even talk to you about like about those topics, it's like so important to like you talk back, not talk back, but like kind of like educate. You don't want to talk back to your elders, but just kind of educate and be like, like this is what God has given me. So it's like, do you want to talk to God about it, or do you like, because like I just can't change it, but I'm willing to accept myself and my color, and yeah, and just be proud. And it's just so not right to like use all these other beauty products to just make myself lighter. And I feel like this is a struggle like still today, like I have to deal with. Like, sometimes like, yeah, I'm accepting of who I am, but it's like so hard, to try to like block their negativity and those comments that they make. I hope that helped.
Thank you for that. We have another question that I think deserves a whole panel on its own, but it's coming from Annie. It reads, when we think to systemic transformation, can we reach intersectional justice and safe spaces for Black Muslims while still letting settler colonial Canada elevate Christianity? I feel decolonization is a huge part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm just going to go hone in on the idea of just like achieving safe spaces for Black Muslims while still having or actively seeing in present day the culture of like Christianity being elevated by settler colonial Canada. Because at least in my experience, like Christianity has been the religion that's been attributed to a lot of like majority groups, including like settlers. And it's almost interesting like how much the practices of the religion is tied into the mindset that has fueled colonialism for as long as I can think back to. And again, I'm no expert in the history of it, but I almost think like one step that can be taken towards that is to be really cognitive of how you speak about religion. Like ultimately there should always be a freedom of choice to like attribute or to almost align yourself with one religion like over the other, but to ensure like safe spaces for people that don't choose the same like religious practices as you need to be really aware of the environment in which you're doing so. And it ties back to the concept of decolonization. And I would agree with you, Annie, in terms of that has to be part of the conversation, because it's almost the same sentiments that are linked to both. Like you just need to be hyper aware of the fact that not everyone is like you. There is not one way of building and leading a life or lifestyle. And so even just it's the same sentiment or mentality that you attribute to recognizing that you're on unceded territory, for example, is the same way you have to make space for the fact that it's not just your beliefs that are worth valuing. In as much as you should respect like the next human being to you, you need to give them like that respect and that choice to be able to recognize, acknowledge, and value like how they've chosen to live.
And I also think it's so important that us, Black folks also ask for those spaces, that we are vocal and, we are here still living in Canada. And times are changing, and slavery ended. Let's take the next step, and let's also continue to build this as like the safe space for us. So I feel like kind of like just being vocal and like kind of talking about the issues that are happening, and like trying to ask for those spaces, like taking the next step, and spreading awareness and doing all that instead of just sitting silent and kind of being like, oh, it is what it is. Yeah.
And I agree with both of the points you made. I think both of you made really great points. To add on to what Umaira said, that yes, being vocal is very important. And I think that in one example I can bring to mind is that at UBC, there's the musalla, and there are some people that are thinking of actually wanting to have a masjid on campus and switch that from musalla to masjid. So there's a lot of these people that are talking to the faculty members. They're talking to a number of people that they know to get to have masjid on campus, because they're talking about how there's a church and there's a synagogue. So the importance of like how important it is to be vocal can really help a long way. I think another thing to keep in mind as well is that we in ourselves have to not just be vocal, but in a sense, what's the thing? It's like just as well, just not trying to think of the right way. Just sorry, I lost a trail of thought, but that's the importance of being vocal and also not really fighting in a sense for what we really want.
Yeah, I think what I'm picking up on from all of your comments is the importance of being critical when we're a part of these systems. I think I love that question from Annie, because I think it really highlights how Christianity and settler colonialism have been one and the same in so-called Canada. I think one way that we see that is particularly like in the legal system. If you go in to testify in a Canadian court, you can either give like a vow of you vow to be honest, or you can swear on the Bible. And so in that like institution of the justice system, Christianity is seen as unmarked, right? It's like that's like the default. And then if you want to swear on the Quran or on anything else, you have to bring that in with you. And I think that really highlights how like these ideologies have been so pervasive in these systems. And it's really on, I think, not only on marginalized communities to step up and ask for things to change or demand that things change, it's really on allies as well. But we have another question from Selma, which asks, when it comes to your social identities, what do y'all see first, being Black or being Muslim? How do y'all dictate what comes first?
Straight off the bat, I feel like there's the biggest difference between the two is that being Muslim is a choice. And being Black is just like, and it's almost something that I joke around with, like my friends sometimes, where it's like, help me to understand the concept of racism, where there's literally nothing I can do to make you comfortable with the fact that I was born with this like skin tone and this skin color. And it's something, it's almost funny to me at this point, just looking into like the perspectives of why this is even like an issue at all. But to stay on the question, without a doubt, like being Muslim is something that comes first, because it's one that I'm making an intentional choice to identify with and live my life by.
Yeah, for me, I definitely would have to say being Muslim comes first. I feel like, because like, I also think about it as like, when I die, like, I don't think like where I was from, my skin color, all that really matters. I feel like, just like my religion is what I'm hoping that is still with me in the afterlife. So that's why I would always say like just being a Muslim is like number one thing on my list. And, identifying as like, a Muslim person has to be, just the first thing. And I really don't know why like a lot of people are like talking about it, because I feel like it's just going into this other issue and it's just like so not unnecessary. But you know, we live in the 21st century and everyone likes to you know, have these talks. And yeah, anyways.
Yeah, okay. I love the points that both of you guys made. I just wanted to make sure you were done. I would say before I wore the hijab, I think I definitely had, for me, it was just like being Muslim was just, it was already a part of my identity, and being Black as well. But it's like before wearing the hijab, it would be being Black come first, because I guess how when I was younger, I viewed my identity based on how the world viewed me. And, you know, as I got older and I wore the hijab, I still like it was became what became first was Muslim again, because when I was younger, how the world viewed me was really how I used to perceive myself. And now that I've gotten older, it's just that my definition of how I view myself is different. And like one of the panelists said that, you know, wearing a hijab and being Muslim and all that, that not wearing a hijab, but being Muslim is being a choice. And so is wearing a hijab. And I think we all put every day, like intentionally, what we do is like, you know, try to strengthen our, you know, how we are as Muslims. And now it's just being like, that's how it plays into, you know, being part of your identity in a way.
I also quickly want to say thank you to Selma for asking the question. I don't want my response to come across as it was an obvious choice there. No, it's not. I feel like it's worth like just thinking through why one should come before the other and just like rationalizing that through. So that was a good question. Thank you for that.
I think you three have given us so much wisdom today. And I guess if I could ask you all to kind of sum up, because I think you've given us like bits and pieces of like in answers to this question throughout the panel. But if I could ask you kind of in short, how you think spaces could be made more inclusive to cultivate belonging and holistic belonging for diverse communities.
I guess I'll go first. For me, I guess based on my experience, I would say that, you know, spaces can be more inclusive or holistic by working on forming a sense of community, you know, trust, and incorporating different forms of self-care within these spaces. You know, once the element of trust and sense of community, like community or even family, is integrated within the space, you know, there's this level of vulnerability that could be demonstrated, as I mentioned in one of the questions earlier. And that you know the individual no longer needs that shield or that shielding of their part of their identity, and can let their walls down and showcase their identity fully. And that you know, with occupying non-inclusive space for a long time, it can be very tiring. So you know, as we like have to spend time analyzing whether or not, you know, we feel comfortable voicing our perspectives or even changing our voice as well as our identity. So we, you know, even just perhaps like creating a wellness or an energy, you know, check in each time, you know, as we step into the space and we listen to others. I guess that's could be one. I think another thing is too, we could have a voice, you know, people talking about the issues that is around the world, or even the issues they face on a daily basis could be another one. And, you know, celebrating or acknowledging, you know, one another's culture in a way that's, you know, as small as just having a greeting, right? That's like in a space, you know, in many different languages, so that the person can feel a little bit more comfortable and safe and feel acknowledged in a way, you know, even if it's just curating some form of like, you know, bringing in some like cultural foods, right? Or even just learning about each other's culture, like willing to learn about that is another thing I would say. And just, you know, holding meetings too, where they could discuss on like what measures to take to make the safe more space and like the space more safe. Sorry about that. And you know, and the feedback and using that feedback to improve forward and make it even better. And one of my friends, she defines spaces as it's organized in a collaboration with the members, you know, of Black and the Muslim community, and that it inclusivity is not really an afterthought, but an inherent part of the culture that helps build trust?
Yeah, I think it's just also like, just try not to ignore the fact that we are Black. Like, just like, it just feels like, when you're in these spaces where you're just the only Black person, people may feel like, oh, people don't really take, like, as you were mentioning, learning about each other's culture, like, people don't even ask about like who you truly are, and like what kind of, where are you from, and it's really hard, like no one ever talks about that, so that's why you always feel like to feel more connected in the space, try to learn about what they're talking about, try to learn about their culture, and like try to talk about that, and then maybe you feel like you're included, that kind of thing. I mean, yes, you feel welcome, but like no one really takes the next measure and ask about your culture or your identity, what being Black means to you, and that kind of thing, because they feel like, oh, controversial, we don't really want to talk about it, we might be offensive towards you, or that kind of thing. But I just like to all those people who are not Black, like just ask a Black person, like, hey, where you're from, like, what's your ethnic food, and what's your culture known for, that kind of thing. I think that would just make me so happy if someone ever asked me that kind of question.
To almost add on to that, I feel like a major step that we all should be working more towards doing is just like rolling up your sleeves and having hard conversations. That's the only way you get better at it on any level, in any space, work, school, family life, etc. Like not shying away from answering hard questions in general. And I think it's something that continues to fascinate me about children. They will ask you anything. It doesn't matter how socially offensive it comes across, as long as there's a curiosity there, like they will ask the question and they will think about your response to it, and it would inform like how they continue to go about their day, month, etc. And yeah, just not shying away from it. And I think that's something that the other panelists like alluded to. And one other thing I wanted to add was in terms of space making, or rather like being in environments where you don't feel welcomed. I think the ones or situations that hurt the most are where it's tiny things that are done. It's the nuances. It's not the outright racist person. It's not the outright Islamophobic individual at the airports. Like it's not the sexist person at work that doesn't answer any of my emails, for example, that I get annoyed at or even like just hurt by. It's when people almost hesitate once like you're being introduced to them for the first time, and maybe like you identify externally as like Muslim, like they don't know how to carry on the conversation after that. Or when you mention that, oh, you're going to start fasting for Ramadan, so you can't join them for like lunches and everything. It's like they almost feel like they have to stop the conversation because I don't know, like, is there a different time we organize with which you feel? And so it's just in those moments, like choosing not to just dial down or step back, but to continue on like in interactions. Like you're going to make mistakes. I feel like that's the only way like you can get better at doing it. And honestly, like there is a disclaimer where it's like, depending on who you meet, like some people could be more sensitive to how you want, as someone that isn't Black, female, or Muslim, like how you want to initiate conversation does matter, because depending on who you meet, like they might not be like, there might be certain traumas they've experienced because of those identities. So that's always something to think about, but don't let it stop you from learning more and educating yourself.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important what you were just saying, because sometimes you kind of mention, oh, like, yeah, I'm fasting, and then no one, like, they just like start talking. But I wish, like, they would talk more about it, because like something I'm passionate about, something I'm really like, I know, like, I've been practicing, and like, so like my being Black, like, that's something like I can really talk about. So I really wish people, like, just asking about my culture, like, I wish people would done that, because then it's like, oh, like, I get to educate you, and I'm an expert on that, because like, it's what I've like. It's my I've lived with this part of like with my culture my whole life. So yeah, I just wish that like people would do that, and like don't wouldn't feel like a bit like weird about asking me those questions, because those questions are welcomed. I very much would rather answer those questions than you just ignore it. You know.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so grateful, alhamdulillah, to have shared this space with you, even though it was virtual. Sahar, Bashira, or Mia, like you're all such beautiful and intelligent and like wise women who have shared so much knowledge with us, and it's truly a gift to receive all of it. So thank you so much for this event. There was so much that you shared with us that I feel like will take me some time to process and really reflect on. So I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, I think we've unfortunately reached the end. I wish we could talk forever. I could hear you three talk forever. But I also just want to thank our audience for coming and sharing space with us and hearing this conversation. I hope you all learned something, and have a nice evening. Thank you so much, everyone. Well, maybe we could all just like unmute and clap for the panelists or something, because I feel like, you know what I mean? They deserve to hear it. Cool. Thank you for indulging me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.